Okay, so Be'ezras Hashem, it's a schus to try and give over a second shir in honor of my Sabba's Yahrtzeit, Rav Yisrael ben Rav David, Rav Yisrael Rosenfeld, the son of Rav David, Hashem Yimkom Domo. And my Sabba was a tzadik, my Sabba was a kadosh, my Sabba grew up Satmar, deeply connected to Satmar. His father was deeply connected to Rav Yaelish from a young age. He became very close Talmud, a close friend of Rav Yaelish. He was Rav Yaelish's Purim Jew. And ultimately, my Sabba felt a very deep connection to Satmar. And then after Satmar, it was Auschwitz. And after Auschwitz, it was nothing. And after nothing, it was modern Orthodoxy. And after modern Orthodoxy, my Sabba went on to really become a pioneer in the field of Jewish education, writing two Svarim, which really went on to be his pride and joy in this world. And I spoke about it last year on his Yahrtzeit. The first sefer he wrote was something called Gemara L'Matchilim, which was a Torah Masorah workbook that was used for, I believe, fifth graders entering into their first sugya in Gemara, bringing it down mamish to the building blocks of the sugya, the aleph base, to make Gemara accessible to those who felt it wasn't accessible. Then there was another sefer that my Sabba wrote that he wrote under a pseudonym because he was afraid that the anonymous they would put him into cherem, even though there was nobody looking to put him into cherem. And that was called Koach Dehetera Adif. That was a sefer that was fundamentally about how halacha at its core is meant to make life enjoyable. And not, God forbid, anything that's removed from the framework of orthodoxy, not anything that was removed from the minutia of the Shulchan Aruch, but rather a deep and fundamental belief that in circumstances where a person can take a lenient path and it's based upon a legitimate Torah source, then the Torah's call to us was to find calmness in our lives, to go the path in which the person's life would be more enjoyable. And so these two elements of my Sabba's life, after Auschwitz, after Satmar, after Auschwitz, coming to Eretz Yisrael, finding his final place in Denver, Colorado, where he became a master educator, these two ideas of Gemara L'Matchilim, of making Gemara easier, of helping a person begin again in their Limud HaGemara, as well as Koach Dehetera Adif, a fundamental understanding of what the goal of the Torah and Yiddishkeit is in this world, which is to make life enjoyable, to give a person the ability to have tainuv. My Sabba was a simple man and a deeply complicated man. My Sabba was simple in his adherence to halacha, in his teaching of the Torah, and his seriousness. He wore a tie his entire life. He woke up early his entire life, even when there was no reason to. But at the same point, there was a seriousness and a depth to him in the fact that he held in trauma upon trauma upon trauma that never really left him. He was able to overcome it. He was able to build beyond it. He was able to live with the memory of that which he lost. But the memory of that which was lost was never far from his mind. My Sabba had nightmares his entire life. My Sabba had numbers on his arm his entire life. My Sabba carried a shadow of the Shoah with him. He carried the loss of his father. He carried the loss of his brother, my namesake, Yoilika, who was killed the first day that he came to Auschwitz, Hashem Yimkom Domo. And my Sabba was a survivor in the truest sense of the word, a survivor in the sense that he never forgot what he saw. He never forgot the burden that he carried, but he deeply understood the fundamental role and task that he had as a survivor, someone who is capable of coming out from the ashes of Auschwitz, from Gehenna itself, and being able to cultivate a life of reasonable happiness and connectivity to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, to his Torah, to Emunah, to the land of Eretz Yisrael, and ultimately to tzadikim. After my Sabba's experience in Satmar, where he felt that his father of David was very, very much mukusher to Rav Yaelish, Zchus Yogan Aleinu, and as a result of that kesher, my Sabba even felt that it was the result of a certain eitzah that the tzadik gave that prevented my father's father from going to Eretz Yisrael. And so after the war, my Sabba was completely and utterly unforgiving of anything connected to Hasidus, completely unforgiving to any bittul hadas, to any nullification of one's mind or one's own thinking, to anything other than their own principles. He felt that laying one's life at the opinion of another person was a dangerous thing to do. But at the same point, my Sabba never forgot the deep love and the bonds and connections that his father had to Rav Yaelish, to the degree that he went back to Rav Yaelish, and Rav Yaelish noticed him. This was a number of years after the war. And my Sabba asked, "How do you notice me?" And he said, the Gabbai said, "It's from the sunken Rosenfeld eyes." And my Sabba encountered Rav Yaelish again. And what he felt was that Rav Yaelish remembered him. And my Sabba had a thought. He said, he remembers me and he didn't reach out and he didn't try and find me these last 10 years. At that point, it gave my Sabba full and utter permission to walk away from the tzadik that he felt his father had been Moshe Nefesh for. So there was a certain connection to the tzadik that gave him permission to kind of completely separate himself from the tzadik. It was the ability to come and realize that there's nothing left here for me. And it gave him the ability to walk away without shame, without guilt, and to build his own path of Avodas Hashem. As he saw me and my brothers learning Chassidus, and he saw us teaching Chassidus, he always warned, no learning Chassidus. And then we learned Chassidus. He said, no levushim. There's still no levushim. But he always warned about being mevatel one's das to a tzaddik, being mavata one's das to a tzaddik until, and it was always troublesome to me. I never fully understood. I never thought there was an inyan of a tzaddik. I mean, tzaddik was a notion that Rebbe Nachman spoke about, but it wasn't the living, breathing thing. But many years later, when I, finding an encounter with real tzaddikim in this world, and tzaddik Yisod Olam and tzaddik B'Emanoso Yichya, and the light of tzaddikim, I always grapple with the fact of maybe my Sabba would be frustrated with this, maybe my Sabba would have a difficult time with this. But ultimately, after having davened over it and gone through it and spoken it out with people much bigger than me, it's fundamentally clear to me that my Sabba in the end had the proper understanding, had a real hiskashus to tzaddikim. And it's like many people who come and start from Satmar, that Satmar is very often a path for somebody to come to Rabbeinu. Right, that you go to Ummah nowadays, you go to places where there's Jews gathering in the hopes of connecting to the true light of tzaddikim, to the light of Rebbe Nachman ben Fegas, the Nachal Nevi Mokar Chachma. You see that many of them are coming from a place of Satmar. Satmar is the secret of a tamar. It's a tidal baum. It's a palm tree. And the Rebbe's kibbutz this year in Yerushalayim, Uman B'Yushalayim, was in the Satmar Beis Medrash. So I thought to myself, I said, tzadik katamar yifrach. That first and foremost, prior to coming to the tzadik, it has to be katamar yifrach. It has to go through the process of tamar, which is the inyan of Satmar, the inyan of Teitelbaum. Rav Yerush understood this deeply as well. When he came to America, he published Likutei Moharan anonymously, and he said, this is what is going to be needed, and I don't need my name on it, but this is something that people are going to need. Having spent some Shabbosim by my Sab and Safta in Denver, something that was incredibly surprising and jarring to me was that what they would do, they were deeply in love with the land of Eretz Yisrael, and my Sab and my Safta would sing Zmiros together after the Shabbos meal, and they would continue singing songs after. And then it hit me that when I heard a familiar song, when they began to sing Naomi Shemer's version of Dalacha, Shekol Roeh V'Roeh, Yesh Lo Nigun Miyuchad Mishalo, singing words based on Rebbe Nachman's Torah, a yearning and a hishtoikakus for Eretz Yisrael rooted deeply in the Nachal Nevi Mokar Chachma, it became fundamentally clear to me that all roads, even the roads of deviation away from the light of the tzaddik, are moving back to a place of the light of the tzaddik, except it's a rehabilitative light of the tzaddik. It's a light of the tzaddik that doesn't say what is, but rather what is not. It doesn't say what a person must feel, but rather what a person can't feel. It cultivates a perspective of yearning and a desire so that a person can bring their soul into it and allow their soul to be expressed through the words of the tzaddik, not to be told by the words of the tzaddik what to do, but rather to uncover the latent potency of spiritual strength that rests within each and every person, specifically through the light of the tzaddikim. So I want to read one ketah from my Sabba's book, The Principle, Rabbi Israel Rosenfeld. It has his number on it, A8531. And this is a biography, an autobiography, a spiritual autobiography of my Sabba. It's a painful book. It's a beautiful book. It's a remarkable book. But I just want to read the last paragraph, and then we're going to go into the teaching from Rebbe Nachman that I want to teach in honor of my Sabba's neshama, and the neshama should have an aliyah, and it should be Me'elis Yosha for his family, for Klal Yisrael, for the entire world. He was a real tzaddik. So my Sabba writes as follows. My life from Chust, which was where he grew up in the Carpathian Mountains, which was where he was part of a Satmar enclave. My life from Chust to Auschwitz, to New York, to Denver, to Hartford, to Israel, to South Africa, and back to Denver tells the story of the resilience of the human spirit and what can be achieved with positive values and constructive goals as your guides. The quote-unquote tattooed principle. He was a principal of a day school. He was a very successful principal. The tattooed principal has persevered and triumphed over most of his persecutors, albeit the price paid was enormous. And in spite of the ghosts and demons of the horrors of the past, they come piercing through the very fragile facade put up with such great efforts to temporarily paralyze the creative energies during the day and to terrorize the tranquility of the night with horrific nightmares of the past. In spite of our tormentors, we continue to live, to be creative, and to contribute contribute to the societies that are willing to accept us as equals. This was my Sabba. My Sabba never shied away from the pain, but my Sabba saw himself as someone who's moving through the pain and cultivating from that pain a true sense of emuna. My Sabba lived with emuna. It was a simple faith that rested upon the halal hapanui. He had seen hell, he had come through hell, he had experienced the burns of hell, but nevertheless, he was capable of continuing to draw faith into hell itself. Like the stories of the tzadikim that the Rebbe of Baruch says, send me to hell, I don't care, because what I'm going to do in Gehenna is I'm going to start saying Torah, and all of the tzadikim are going to come to listen to my Torah, and in that moment, hell is going to be transformed into Gan Eden. So the secret of my Sabba's life, as I understand it, was transforming hell into a place of Gan Eden, taking the halal hapanui, taking the vacant space of Auschwitz, taking the vacant space of the Shoah, taking the vacant space and the emptiness of destruction and things that were destroyed and things that don't come back, and ultimately a persistent and stubborn faith with an unreasonable belief in the fact that even though there's a vacant space here, even though there's a halal hapanui here, even though there's something that is completely and utterly devoid of the apparent presence of God, nevertheless, the emunah dictates that God must be found there. How, where, why, what, when, none of that was of a question or even of importance to my Sabba. What mattered most was the fact that Hashem was there. It didn't need proof. It was simply the testament that he received from his father. My Sabba loved to quote the Sefer Habris, which bases the tradition of faith upon a simple principle that a father doesn't lie to their son. And he trusted the transmission of faith, and he trusted it fiercely. There were moments in my Sabba's life where, when he was cleaning out the materials of the Jewish people in the Canada section of Auschwitz, there was a dayan from Chus there, and he said, Srilka, my Sabba was 16, and he said, Srilka, it's going to be Sukkah soon, so let's save some of our bread so that we can make a bracha. There's some planks of wood out there, and we're going to make a bracha of Leishev Basukah. And my Sabba built up and prepared to make this bracha. And as he was preparing, he said he was fundamentally certain that Mashiach Tzidkenu was going to arrive as a result of this mitzvah. And under the cover of night, him and this dayan from Chust ran underneath this plank of wood, and they made a leishev basukah. And my father said to my Sabba, he said, Dad, but when you looked up through the schach, you didn't see stars, you saw smoke from the crematoria, and Mashiach didn't come. So what did you do afterwards? Were you angry at God? Did you yell at God? Did you give up? And my Sabba said, none of that has anything to do with me. The only thing that I knew was what I needed to do, which was to bring Mashiach in that moment. If Mashiach doesn't want to come in that moment, he'll come in the next moment when he decides. So my father said, Dad, but what did you do next? He said, we started peeling potatoes so that we can make a menorah for Hanukkah. This was the story of my Sabba's life, a persistence of faith that did not make room for questioning. He used to quote the Chafetz Chaim all the time. Unbeknownst to him, it was a Chafetz Chaim, but he said that with faith, there are no questions. Without faith, there are no answers. My Sabba was uncomplicated in his faith, but profoundly complicated in the traumas that led him to cultivate such a simple and potent form of faith. So it was a combination of hell and Gan Eden. It was a combination of drawing Gan Eden into hell by way of the simple and potent light of Emunah that my Sabba held on to for his entire life. And this is something that I want to look at in Rebbe Nachman, Rebbe Nachman's story of the Sheva HaBatlarim, the 13th tale of Rebbe Nachman's Maisios Meshanim Kadmonios. The goal of these stories is meant to awaken, by way of evocation, a deep, deep-seated memory that is prior to memory. It's meant to awaken the ancient root of the soul of each and every Jew that knows of narrative frames that it does not yet know. It understands the structure of the story. It understands the mystifying ups and downs and openings and closings and abrupt endings and open-ended continuities of the stories. There's a certain sense of familiarity with the bewildering and strange landscapes and dreamscapes that Rebbe Nachman paints for us in Sipurei Maisios. But nevertheless, no matter how strange, no matter how unhomely and unheimlich they all seem to be, and no matter how foreign the elements seem to be, nevertheless, they awaken a certain evocation within the depth of the soul that it's starting to smell something like home. There's a homesickness that's elicited when reading the Sipurei Maisios Meshanim Kanmonios, because it beckons us back to an ancient place prior to the beginning of time where things were okay. And the stories were meant to bypass the complications of the mind where Rebbe Nachman was trying to share Torah, and it was getting lodged in the minds of his Hasidim. And Rebbe Nachman wanted to go back to the most ancient part of the self, which was the innermost point of the heart, the etzem haluz of the heart, that part of the Jewish soul that perpetually persists in spite of all things. This was what Rebbe Nachman came to awaken in the Yud Gimel Tikkunei Dikna and the 13 rectifications of the beard rooted in Keser, which are the light of the Sipurei Maisios, to awaken us back to a place that we're not familiar with, but we become familiar with our unfamiliarity with it. We're not sure why we find ourselves in a place of comfort in the Sipurei Maisios. We're not sure where we find ourselves in the story, but nevertheless, there's a certain comfort which pushes the reader to perpetually try and uncover more understanding in the stories. The deepest book in the world is Sipurei Maisios Meshanim Kanmonios, the most Kabbalistic sefer, the simplest sefer, the most evocative one, the most psychologically beneficial one, the one that helps most with prayer, the one that helps most with eating, the one that helps most with anxiety and sadness and joy and exuberance is Sipurei Maisios Meshanim Kanmonios. It opens a person's mind up to an ancientness that is so ancient that the mind is not even familiar with it, but it gives us a certain sense of seriousness and longing and a yearning, a desire for we know not what that fills each and every word, pregnant with an excitation that does not yet even know what it's excited about. And in the 13th tale, the culmination of the tales, the Maisa Mesheva Habatlarim. Now, the Maisa Mesheva Habatlarim is the story of existence, and it's the story of our generation, and it's the story of post-trauma, and it's the story of Matan Torah, and it's the story of Yitzias Mitzrayim, and it's a story that goes all the way back to Adam Arishon and Chava, even before the creation of the world. But to summarize, as we've done so often, what happens is that there was a king who wanted to do something very special. He wanted to give kingship over to his son, even in the lifetime of the king. And the king warns his son, he says, I promise you, you're worthy of being king based on one simple principle. You must maintain joy in spite of all changes and shifts. If you can maintain joy even when you lose your kingship, then you're worthy of being king. If your joy is dependent and contingent upon your kingship, then you're unworthy of being king, and then I'm happy that you're not king. And that is the setup of the story. And then something happens. That which happens, happens. Something takes place, a catastrophe takes place, a cataclysm takes place, a Shoah takes place, and it sends everybody running for the forest. Everybody is exiled suddenly in a moment of traumatic upheaval, and everybody runs to the forest. And in the trauma, in the namelessness of the trauma, in the sheer immensity of the trauma, which denies the possibility of proper names, what Rebbe Nachman ensures that we maintain is the sense of the proper name within it. So when everybody is lost, everybody continues, but what's left behind is a 4-year-old boy and a 5-year-old girl, or a 5-year-old girl and a 4-year-old boy. 2 children are left behind in the forest, and they're scared and they're starving and they don't know what is what and they don't know which way is which. And it's like my Sabba describes after coming out of Auschwitz and having no place to go, and then being taken to Russia and having no place to go, perpetually on the brink of not knowing what to do. And the children who are lost in the forest know how to do one thing and one thing only. They start screaming out. And suddenly, in the midst of their screaming out, mysterious creatures appear, mysterious tzadikim, mysterious messengers that carry gifts, messengers that look deficient, a blind beggar and a deaf beggar and a stuttering beggar and a crooked neck beggar and a hunchback beggar and a handless beggar and a legless beggar. And all of these beggars come and they provide these children who are lost in the forest with food. And the children say, please don't go. We love you so much. Please don't go. Take us with you. And they say, no, we'll return. And the children slowly but surely find their way in the forest, and they become beggars amongst all the other beggars. And the other beggars decide, well, these 2 young beggars, they deserve joy as well. So why not have them wed each other? Why not have them bring joy into the world of begging, into this world after the storm, after the trauma, after the breakdown, after that which happened. And they say, okay, it's a wonderful idea, but how are we going to allow these 2 young beggars to get married? Where are we going to get the food for it? Where are we going to get the sustainability for it? So they say, there's going to be a big ball in the royal courtship down the road in a month from now. And we'll go there and we'll pick up the pirurim, we'll pick up the leftovers, we'll pick up the crumbs, and we'll dig a pit very deep in the mud, and we'll cover it with twigs and branches and garbage. And that's where we're going to have the chasana. And so it was that this was the chasana of the lost boy and the lost girl who were lost after the trauma, who found joy in marriage amongst the beggars in a pit into the mud covered over with trash. And in the midst of the simcha, it was time for the Sheva Brachos. And lo and behold, it was the 7 beggars, those 7 tzadikim, those 7 mysterious Bali Mumim, those deficient creatures who appeared deficient, who come and they offer their gifts. And each and every one of the Sheva Brachos is one of those beggars who came along and said, I'm going to give you food now, but you can't stay with me. They come and they deliver their gifts. And the blind beggar says, you think I'm blind? I'm not blind. I just see so far that nothing even registers within my eyes. And I give you a blessing that you should be old like me, young like me, and old like me. And the deaf beggar says, you think I'm deaf? I'm not deaf at all. It's just that I can't tolerate the sounds that emerge from deficiency. I can't tolerate the pain. I can't tolerate the shrying and the sighing and the crying. All I want to hear is the sounds of shvachos v'tishbachos to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So it appears that I'm deaf. And the stuttering beggar says, you think I'm stuttering, but I have the most beautiful words in the world. I have words that can draw together the spring on the top of the mountain and the heart of the world. That can unify all unifications, says the stuttering beggar. And the hunchback, the crook-necked beggar says, you think I'm crooked-necked? I'm not crooked-necked. I just know how to breathe deeply. I know how to breathe differently than everybody else. And the hunchback beggar says, I'm not hunchbacked. I just know the secret of empathy. I know how to carry somebody else's pain. And the handless beggar says, you think that I'm handless? I'm not handless. It's just that my hands are reserved for something far more important. And the 7th beggar doesn't arrive. We've known this. We've spoken about this. There were poems written by Breslover Hasidim in the Shoah begging HaKadosh Baruch Hu to allow Rebbe Nachman to finish the story and to send the legless beggar, which is Mashiach ben David, which is a secret of the Emunah Kol Zos. All we have is the handless beggar, the 6th bracha. And that's what we're going to discuss right now. The 6th beggar, each and every one of the beggars came and they said, we have a story to tell about why we're really special, why we're not really deficient, but in truth, we're really special. And each one of them had different proofs, and each one of them has enigmatic tales to tell and stories within stories within stories. But when we come to the 6th day, is where we're going to encounter a very delicate nakuda. And this is what I want to read tonight. Zok the Heiliger Rebbe. On the 6th day, they were also very joyous. And the children were yearning. How do we draw forth for ourselves that tzaddik who is without hands? And immediately, in the midst of their yearning, in the midst of their desire, in the midst of their anticipation, the handless beggar arrives. And he says with humility and joy, here I am. I came to be joyous with you by your wedding. And he said to them, I'm here to give you the gift. And he kissed them and he said, you think that I have blemishes in my hands? You think I'm handless? My hands have no blemish whatsoever. I have a profound strength in my hands. I simply do not utilize the strength of my hands in this world. I need the utilization of my hands for something else entirely. And I have proof about the utilization of my hands from what? From the palace of water, from the secret palace of water. Once upon a time, there were a number of people sitting together, and there were discussions about the value of each and every person's hands. And this handless beggar started asking, you think you have strong hands? What do you use your hands for? And one said, I have the strongest hands in the world because my hands have the ability to retrieve the arrow even after it's shot. And he says, that's really good, but how many arrows can it retrieve? All 10 of them? And he says, no, only one of them. And he says, okay, there's 10 arrows with 10 different types of poison, and if you can only retrieve one of them, so then you don't have the strongest hands. Another person came along and he says, I have the strongest hands in the world because I have hands that are so strong, when I take from somebody else, it's as if I'm giving to them. When I'm makabel from them, it's as if I'm giving to them. Another person comes along and he says, I have hands so strong that I can utilize the wind to ensure that the weather is good. I can stop the storm. Another one says, I have the secret of a negina. I have the negina that can heal all things. And for each and every one of these, the handless beggar keeps saying, how many can you heal with your negina? How many arrows can you capture? Because there's 10 types of arrows, and there's 10 types of negina, because there's 10 pigamim, and there's 10 ways of falling, and there's 10 pockets of deficiency, and there's 10 moments of the person's life that feel like it's breaking down. Each person can go through it in each of their own ways, but the 10 sphirot, the 10 parts of the self, are perpetually under threat of collapse back into the olam hatohu. And this tzaddik is saying, can you really fix it? Can you fix one thing or can you fix all things? Because enough with fixing one thing. I'm so strong, I can fix everything. That's what my hands are. And he says as follows. He says, Yeshli Maisa, I have a story that will tell you that I have the strongest hands available. Once upon a time, there was a king who had a profound desire for a princess. And this king, this evil king, this side of concealment wanted this princess so badly, and he tried so many different ways of capturing the Bas Malka, the Bas Melech. Ad asher also biyado v'tafsa. Until the other side, until negativity, until the evil king Melech Evyon, the fiendish forces of destruction and concealment in this world, it captures the Shechina. But that evil king had a dream. Shehi amda alav v'harga osa, that this princess was going to rise up and kill him. He woke up terrified from this dream, and he called to all of the dream interpreters, and they all interpreted the dream in its simple form, that she was going to kill him. That the dream was going to be interpreted in the way it had to be interpreted, that she was going to kill him. But the Melech didn't know what to do. I can't kill her, I love her. I can't send her away from me, because that'll make me more furious. Because Kina is roikeves at the atmos. His jealousy was so big that he couldn't send her away. It would have been too difficult. This king had tried so hard to find the princess, to retrieve the princess. Now it should be in the hands of somebody else. And even if I send her else to somebody else and she ends up with someone else, but that dream can still come true. She can still find a way to kill me because she's still alive. Yahrtzeit etzlo, I can't hold on to her because she might kill me, but I can't send her out either. And the king, the evil king, did not know what to do with this princess. Slowly but surely, the king's love for this princess began to soften, and it began to fade away as a result of this dream more and more. It got so bad that she began to despise him in such a real way, she couldn't tolerate it, and she ran away from him. And this king sends his officers after the princess to find her. And the officers of this evil king came back, and they said, she's found by the palace of water. Because in truth there is a palace of water. A palace of water. Walls of water. Water that sustains itself, instability that is sustained, nothingness that stands. And over there are 10 barriers, 10 walls, 10 perimeters, one within the other, and all of these walls are composed of water. And the floor upon which we walk in that palace is also made of water. And there are trees with fruit, all of it is water. And the beauty and the wondrous novelty of this palace of water, a person doesn't even have to begin to speak about. Because most certainly it's the most wondrous thing of all. It's a paradox in terms. It's the sustainability of something that's unsustainable. Water is nothing to stand upon, yet it stands. And a person cannot enter into this palace of water because someone who enters in is going to drown within the water. It's all mayim. But this princess, when she ran away, she came to that palace of water, and she found herself surrounding the perimeter of that palace of water. And they told this evil king who wanted to capture the Bas Melech, that she's surrounding the perimeter of that palace of water. And the Melech and his officers went to grab her by the palace of water. And when the princess, the Bas Melech, saw that they were chasing after her, she answered herself, and she decided to run into the palace of water. Because she chose and she preferred to run into the palace of water rather than be caught by that Melech. And maybe, just maybe I'll be saved. Maybe somehow, some way there'll be a miracle and I'll be saved. With that Mesiras Nefesh, v'tucha lichnois l'teicha mipsar shemayim kanal, and perhaps I'll be able to enter into that palace of water. When the king, the evil king, saw that the Bas Melech was running into the palace of water, Amar me'achar shehu kain, as if this is the case, Al Kain Siva Liyarososa, he commanded his officers to shoot arrows at her. The im tamus tamus, and if she dies, she should die. And they were shooting at her. And she was hit with the 10 different arrows, with the 10 different poisons. They all entered her. And she ran further into the water. And she entered into the palace of water. And she passed through those gates that were formed in the form of water, because they're gates and they're pathways within that palace of water. And she entered into all of the 10 perimeters and all of the 10 partitions that rested within that Mibsar Shamayim. And she fell there in weakness and in pain, and I healed her. Someone who doesn't have all 10 forms of righteousness cannot enter into the 10 boundaries of water, for they'll drown. And that melech and his officers tried chasing after her, and they all drowned in the water. I have the strength of entering into all of the 10 partitions of water. And these partitions in the water are the waves of the sea that stand strong like a barrier. And the winds, and there are winds that allow these waves of the sea to stand strong as if they're sturdy. And these waves of the sea, which are the 10 perimeters, they're in a state of perpetual sustainment and they're standing upright. But nevertheless, it's only because of the perpetual upkeep as a result of the gusts of wind that hold the water upright. And I can enter into all of these 10 partitions of water. And I have the ability of restoring the basmalka, and I can retrieve all of the 10 different poisonous arrows from her. And I know all of the forms of the pulse. I know all forms of the heartbeat. I know the asara mini negina. I know the tikkun klali. Because each and every one of the 10 fingers represents another pulsation, represents another song, another lashon of tefillah, which is the secret of being mamtik all of the poison by way of the tikkun klali. And I have the ability to fix her, to heal her, to fix the basmalka through the 10 forms of song. And as a result, I can heal her. I have this strength in my hands. Now I'm giving this to you as a gift. And there was a great joy that emerged there. Rabba Ma'od. That's the Maisa of the Mibsar Shamayim. Rabbi Nachman in Hilchos Talaim immediately expresses the fact that this Mibsar Shamayim is the Chalal HaPanui. And a person has to learn Torah Samach Daled in order to understand this palace of water. The question of the Chalal HaPanui, as Rabbi Nachman describes, the question of the vacant space in which HaKadosh Baruch Hu had to exit in order to reveal himself, which means on the one hand that there's a place devoid of godliness, like Auschwitz and like the Chalal HaPanui. Yet on the other hand, it's impossible for that place to be devoid of godliness. It's the impossible upholding of a paradox that by its own very definition, each side should negate the other side. But instead of negating the other side, they both simultaneously uphold each other. This is the secret of the Chalal HaPanui, that on the one hand, it's absent and empty from the light of God. By definition, for the sake of there's something other than God to take shape, it has to be empty. But on the other hand, it's axiomatic and absolutely impossible to conceive of a place that's actually devoid of the light of God, which means to say that nothing can actually take shape there. But we see that something takes shape, but we know that something can take shape, but we see that it takes shape, and we know that it can take shape. Very much like the walls of the water palace, which are waves that are upheld by wind. Water, by definition, has no shape. Water, by definition, is only going to take on the shape of the vessel in which it's placed. But water itself is infinite in its force, and it doesn't maintain the capacity of solidifying itself. But in the secret of the Mibsar Shamayim, this unsolidified expression of the watery depths of the infinite light of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, they take shape. It's impossible for water to take shape, just as it's impossible for God to remove himself from any place. Nevertheless, it's a paradox within itself, and the two fundamentally simultaneous pulsations of that singular impulse reveal the yichud of the secret of the tzimtzum, which is that Hashem reveals his own concealment. Hashem reveals the capacity of something being absent from him to maintain its own existence, because the absence of him is the way that Hashem reveals himself in that place. The emptiness that one feels when contemplating the void, the emptiness that one feels when they contemplate running away from that evil king into that place of absolute Mesiras Nefesh, of Kasher Avadati, that I will lose myself as I lose myself in the Mibsar Shamayim, but the surprise and the impossible, unique, wondrous novelty of creation that HaKadosh Baruch Hu gives over to the Jewish people in the secret of that Tzimtzum is a Gilui, that the walls of water stand. Somehow, some way, it's impossible to understand how, where, when, in what way. But in the end of the day, the secret of faith, the only kli necessary to receive the capacity of God's expression being found in the place of his absence, of the stability of the walls being found in a place of complete and utter instability, which is water, that's the secret of the Chalal HaPanui. And when we come close to the Chalal HaPanui, we know from last week's Parsha that it's Bo El Paro, Ki Ani Hechbadati Es Libo, and Rebbe Nachman opens up Torah Samach Dalid, which is the Torah of the Tzimtzum, which says that it's based on the Zohar that says, Boel Paro, how could Hashem be telling Moshe Rabbeinu to come forth to Paro? Paro is the Chalal HaPanui. Paro is the Nachash. Paro is the Tanin HaGadol. Paro is the source of difficulty and pain and suffering and Shoah and death and absence and loss and unfairness and all of the terrible, terrible, terrible things that take shape in a world that HaKadosh Baruch Hu gives over to human beings on a revealed level. How could it be that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is found there? How could it be that Hashem is saying, come to me in the house of Paro? The Zohar HaKadosh says, Hashem, you're not there. Leichel Paro mi ba'ilei. Hashem should say to Moshe, you go there. Obviously, Hashem is only found in Kedusha. He's not found in dark. Zok the Heilige Zohar HaKadosh that no, Adrabah Ibcha Mistaber, HaKadosh Baruch Hu speaks forth from the mouth of Paro himself. HaKadosh Baruch Hu is found within the Chalal HaPanui, within the absolute and utter concealment of his own revelation is the very presence of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It's in that place that Hashem is revealing himself most potently, in that place of Auschwitz, in that place of absence, in that place of Tachte Sahar, in that place of Kasher Avadati, in that place of Derech Emuna Bacharti, because there's absolutely nothing left other than the capacity to maintain faith in the fundamental paradox of it all, to transform the colossal paradox into the secret of the Mibsar Shamayim, where the tzadik has the ability to go and heal the chulsha of the Shekhinah. The Shekhinah runs there. Klal Yisrael gets so broken, Klal Yisrael gets so frightened, Klal Yisrael gets so hurt throughout existence that sometimes the only reasonable thing to do is to run directly into the Chalal HaPanui. The Bas Malka knew what she was doing. The Shekhinah knew what she was doing. To be saved from the other side, a person has to run into the Svara of Tzimtzum. A person has to go into the Tzimtzum, Bo El Paro, go into that place, go into the place of the apikorsis of the Chalal HaPanui, those unanswerable questions, which in their depth are not even questions, because the ability to provide an answer to them is built on a notion of a certitude and a certainty that is simply unavailable to human beings, and it only is expressed by God himself. To be a human being means that one cannot answer the questions. And in that place of the kfira of the Chalal HaPanui, where it appears that there's absolutely no capacity to spark the light of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, it's specifically by running into that place and saying, Rabbeinu Shloim, Afal Pikain, you're going to be found here. I don't know how, I don't know why, I don't know where, I don't know if it's true. It doesn't matter. You're here. You have to be here. You have to be here. You have to be here. It's impossible that you're not here. It's impossible that you're not here. You're not here. That doesn't matter. It's impossible that you're not here. That's the secret of the Mibsar Shamayim. And the Bas Malka runs there. The Shekhinah knows where it has to run, because the Chalal HaPanui is the highest and most potent form of a HaKadosh Baruch Hu's expression in this world. As Rebbe Nachman says, it's the schar of La'asid Lavo. Hinani mevi arbe machar b'gvulecha. I'm going to bring arbe, locusts, into your territory tomorrow. Machar l'kabel scharim. Rebbe Nachman says that to draw unanswerable antinomies and fundamental paradoxes which reveal the potency of faith into consciousness is drawing down a makif into a panimi. It's drawing down an unconsciously felt known expression that is so far beyond information that it has no expression within the self, but through the gradations of spiritual growth where I grow and what was unknowable becomes knowable, only to reveal a new unknowable level ad infinitum. When I draw that makif in, that's machar, that's the schar of la'asad lavo, that will have the ability of understanding how Hashem was present within the Chalal Apani all along, and that the Bas Malka, the Shechina, the Pnimiusa understands that Hashem is found within the concealment itself, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is found within the Hastara Shebetoich HaHastara, Bevadai Sham Nimsa Hashem Yisparach. Bevadai Sham Nimsa Hashem Yisparach. How? Why? It doesn't matter. It's the secret of Vadai. Havadai Shemo Kenti Lasso. It's acting like an insane person on Purim where I know anything with certainty because I know that I can never know anything with certainty. But this I know with certainty. I know faith. That's the secret of the Mibsar Shamayim. That's the secret of the Bas Malka who runs into that place to give us the weapon of faith. It's only in the void. It's only in the Chalal Apanui that a person comes to realize that the only spiritual tool that really means something is Emunah. Emunah is the only thing that has the possibility of shining light within that dark space. The Emunah Kolzos, the Emunah that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is found there, the Emunah of Avram Avinu who traverses the Chalal. He doesn't answer up the kasha of the Chalal. He enters into a place of Emunah, Vayaminu b'Hashem v'yachshav tzedakah, that is far beyond the ability to resolve antinomies. It's the secret of what my Sabba would say, is that with Emunah, one needs no answers or questions. Emunah stands on its own. Emunah has Emunah in itself. As Rebbe Nachman says, we draw Emunah from the shorish of Emunah. In the secret of Derech Emunah B'charti, it's a real thing. Just like the Chalal Apanui is nothing that is something, so too Emunah is a nothing that is something. It's the closest thing we have to the creation of the world. I can create more faith that's born out of absolutely nothing and stands upon absolutely nothing other than Emunah. The Emunah Kolzos. Rav Avram ben Rav Nachman, in a hidden book, we've discussed this book before, in a hidden book that's not yet published, and he didn't want it published until the coming of Mashiach, a book called the Emunah B'Yediyah Ruchanis, spiritual knowledge. Das, it's a book of Das. Rav Avram ben Rav Nachman was the secret of drawing Rabbeinu, drawing the tzadik into Eretz Yisrael. He writes as follows. We have a few ketayim of it, a few pieces of it that are found in Koich Ve'or. And he writes as follows. In Siman Zion, the Chol Hanal, everything that we've just discussed, and the secret of the impossibility of Hashem being present and absent, and therefore being present and absent at once, and the secret of Hashem being revealed in all of concealment, as Rav Avram ben Rav Nachman was speaking about, and the ability of ascending beyond time and living the Moichin and Mashiach. Rav Avram ben Rav Nachman says as follows: all of this is contained within the secret of the Mibtsar Hamayim, the palace of water, Shenizkar b'Sipurei Maisios. That's referenced in Sipurei Maisios, Kemevur lebekutei halachos, as is explained in Lekutei Halachos, Hilchos Tolaim Halacha Daled, in the Halachos of Tolaim, Shehu HaChalal Apanui, that this Mibsar of Mayim is the Chalal Apanui, meaning to say it's empty from the wisdom of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It's impossible to find HaKadosh Baruch Hu there by way of wisdom. A person can only enter into the knowledge of HaKadosh Baruch Hu there by something above wisdom, which is the secret of Emunah. But Chachma and Das have no entry point into the Mibsar Shamayim. If you come with Moichin, you're not going to find light in that place. Zulas ba'achtus ha'emunah v'ha'chachma. It's only in the unity of Emunah and Chachma, ascending up to the level of Keser, Mesiras Nefesh Mamish, of the awareness that I don't know anything, and Tachlas Yediyah Shalened, and the secret of Ba'atika Talya Milsa, Meha Oile Shemayim V'Yorid Ben Yigun Yadav L'Rapois Lahakim L'Besulas Yisrael. Only the secret of ascending up to Shemayim and going down to the depths through the secret of playing the songs, playing on the Chesronos, utilizing all deficiency to reveal the song of La'asid Lavo, which is Az Yashir Moshe, and my Sabba was also redeemed from Auschwitz in Shabbat Shira. Shabbat Shira was the Yahrtzeit of my Sabba, but it's also the time that he was redeemed from Auschwitz, and the secret of the Shir Pashut Kafel Meshulish Meruba, of going up and down and revealing by way of concealment the radical revelation of Emunah that shines itself even in concealment itself, to bring healing to Besulas Yisrael, to elevate the Shechina, Asher Nafla V'Yarda B'Mechuvoisav V'Demyonoisav, that has fallen into its concealment and fallen into its imaginings, where it thinks it has to utilize knowledge instead of faith. Kihu Levad Kol Tikvaseinu V'Toichlasenu La'av because the only hope that we actually have forever and for always is lahapich es hayarida la'aliyah, to transform the yerida itself into an aliyah. This is the secret of the Mibsar Shamayim, that it's running into the tzimtzum itself. And when a person runs into the tzimtzum itself, what they come to find is that it's a revelation of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and that somehow, some way, all of the concealment is revelatory of the Mayim Ha'elyonim. The Mayim Ha'elyonim, the Arizal uses the language of Or Ein Sof, infinite light. But the Kadmoinim and the Arizal also brings it at the beginning of Eitz Chaim. There's another way of referring to the infinite expression of HaKadosh Baruch Hu prior to the creation of the world, which is Mei Ein Sof, the endless, infinite waters. Water expresses chesed. Water expresses the descent from above to below. Tchias hamesim, tal hatchia, gishmei bracha. The secret of mikveh Yisrael Hashem, the secret of purity, the secret of the mum ein bach, the secret of that there's no mum, and all of the pain and all of the difficulty is going to be wiped away with the mayim chayim that are yotzei from Yerushalayim, the mayim chayim that are yotzei from Yerushalayim, and the secret of the etzem haluz, which is the irreducible point of the soul that secretes its own liquid into our experience. It's the mayim chayim that's yotzei from Yerushalayim. It's the ability to see beyond death, to see life, to see the bracha of life that comes forth from within concealment, and to believe, in spite of all things, to fundamentally hold on to a belief like water that is always present and always flowing forth and never emptying itself out, but Mei Ein Sof, a perpetual belief that things are going to be good and Od Yoter Tov, and things can be healed and things can be fixed, and that even when there's loss, ultimately it creates the ground. Every Yerida creates the ground for a radical revelation of new lights and new watery expressions of the infinite light of HaKadosh Baruch Hu that cannot have been expressed without the Yerida, that cannot have been expressed without the concealment. My Sabba's life is a testament to this. This is what I experienced from my Sabba, and this is something that is my Sabba was a master student of Hester Panim, and what he came out with was a silent faith that retained all things. There was a simple thing, to believe in love, to believe in connectivity, to believe in the secret joy that pervades all things. And for me, this brings up a very, very powerful thing. It's not even appropriate for me to read, but I want to read something that my Sabba writes. He says, "We still have no idea where we were or why we were there. I recall standing in formation a very long line, still holding on to Father, on a huge parade ground. Some guys came around to cut all of the hair off our heads and our bodies. We remained standing there completely naked for several hours while German officers with vicious-looking and growling dogs looked us over. There were no signs of the women or the children. We never saw Yoelika again. I could only try and conjure up in my darkest hours of deep depression the scene of Yoelika being gassed to death, screaming to Father for help, with his last gasps of breath feeling abandoned and panic-stricken. He certainly deserved to grow older, at least old enough to realize that he was not, capital N-O-T, abandoned or ever forgotten by his parents and siblings who loved him so much. We never even had the chance of a final hug or a final farewell kiss. Who knows what contributions to mankind he may have made, what he had he been given the chance to live. Who knows what his children would have been like? We shall never know. It is sheer torture to speculate along these lines, and it doesn't get easier or less painful with time. If at least there was a grave to go to and cry over his lost youth. What a pity that we will go down into our graves never knowing the answers to these tormenting questions. His memory lives on. Our second oldest and wonderful grandson proudly carries his name, Yoel Elimelech Rosenfeld, which is my namesake. This is the Mayim Chaim that are Yotzei from Yerushalayim. The secret, confident faith that persists under the harshest of conditions, where there's actually nothing other than faith that exists in that place of the Chalal Apanui, in that 0 point of Hashem's revelation, which only takes shape by way of concealment. The potency, the nuclear energy that is contained within that very slight edging out of infinitude to express itself as a blip into the finite, so that all of existence can take shape. That place of the Evan Hashasiyah, that place of the Tzimtzum B'Sheirasho, that is the place that's going to be Nahapich to Simcha. When that place is filled, it's going to be filled with a Simcha Ein Sofit, a Simcha that transforms the Halal into a place of Chayim. The Emek HaMelech says that the Halal's Gematria 68 is the Gematria of Chayim. There's Chayim ad Olam. There's no deficiency, there's no loss, there's no emptiness, there's no concealment, there's no absence of God. This is what Torah Samach Dalet tells us. Boyel Paro, HaKadosh Baruch Hu is in Paro. He's in the house of Paro. And as the Rebbe was saying this week, Bo is Bitachon and Emunah. With Bitachon and Emunah. Bo is Rosh Hashanah's Bitachon and Emunah. Emunah is the rooted knowledge that will never be shifted away from because it's based on nothing. It's my choice, Derech Emunah B'charti. And Bitachon is the applied physics of that, where I actually live my life in a state of perpetual trust, imagined trust that brings down the light of La'asalavu into my mind in the secret of the Maisame Bitachon, Bitachon and Emunah are the things that remain. Bitachon and Emunah are the things that remain. And my Sabba said his number was Aleph, was A 8531. And so when my Sabba was talking about his younger brother, so he says that he was not abandoned. Now there's a notion in Kabbalah and Hasidus that lo, when it says low, it doesn't just mean no, but rather low represents a higher level of grasp, because the only way that it can be grasped is by way of negative grasp. Because to lay claim to something by way of by way of cataphatic grasp is b'derech kain, saying yes to something. I grasp it, but that's limiting, because if I could apply terms to it, then it by definition is contained within those terms. So when it comes to grasping the infinite, as the Rambam points out, and as the secret of Tzimtzum teaches us, the only thing I can do is say what it is not, because any attempt to lay claim to any definitive expressions of the infinite is already collapsing the infinite into definition, and therefore the only true definition is that it's definitionless, which takes me to the place of the silent faith and the tachlis hayadiyah shalei neda. And that inyan of lo is revelatory of a much higher level of expression. Though I walk in the shadow of death, lo imadi, there's a secret of HaKadosh Baruch Hu being present in a way that is so profoundly present that it feels like absolutely nothing. It feels like absolutely nothing, because it is the scene. It's not filling the scene, but it is the scene itself. It's not filling time, it is time itself. It's not filling experience, it is experiencing itself. In that place of Malchus, that lowest place of Malchus, of Emunah, of Evan Masu Abanam Haiflu Roshpina, in that place, there's a revelation of the Loi da Album and the secret of the highest level of Lo. And so just thinking about my Sabba's number is A, which is Aleph, which is the secret of Pella Elyon, which is the secret of Keser. 85 is the secret of Peh or Po, which is here. And 31 is the secret of Lo. So on the one hand, it can be said to be Aleph in the secret of the Pella, which is that Lo is Po, that the Darga of Lo, the album, is present. Or it can be that Lo is expressed through the Peh, which is the secret of Akudim, which is the Das of the Reshad Lo Asyada, in the secret of that La'olam Yilmod es Lashon Chalomer Eini Yodea, that a person should teach their mouth to perpetually say, I don't know, because it's not about not knowing, it's about perpetually coming to a place of not knowing. But when I wrote this earlier, Hapela also. So it's Aleph Hapela, because Peh and Lamed Aleph is also Hapela. So I'm thinking a lot about my Sabba, and all we have is the ability to lay ourselves upon the schus of the Avos HaKadoshim, of Moshe Rabbeinu, of the tzadikim in our generation, of the tzadikim in our bloodlines. And there's nobody who doesn't have a tzadik like this. There's nobody whose family didn't go through this on one level or another. And each person, that's why Amet Kulam Tzadikim, that's why our generation is so ripe for redemption, because all of the work has been done. And it's very important to maintain the fundamental knowledge that in the grand scope of history, we're still very close proximity-wise to the time of the Shoah. And we're not dealing with a separate stage of history right now. We're still dealing with the outgrowth of that time. And Be'ezras Hashem, from that place, there's going to be a Yeshua Gemura and a Sarah Yaakov, and there's a time of pain and difficulty, which is the secret of the Chalal Apanui, Mimenu Yivasheh, and specifically from within the Chalal Apanui is going to be the Mayim Chayim, the emergence of the Tzimtzum revealing itself to be the Gilui of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and the secret of Yitzchak, and the secret of the laughter of Yitzchak, and the secret of Yisrael, Ben of David, the secret of Malchus and Teferes being mitchaber together to reveal the secret of Mashiach Tzidkenu Be'ezras Hashem. Okay, the Neshama should have an aliyah, and yeah, we should be Zoich.
Amen.